In the summer of 2024, 12 of the greatest minds in the history of video game development, design, and theory gathered in the woods of Southern Oregon to discuss the modern gaming industry and the emergence of artificial intelligence technology. This is a series of conversations between old friends, old men now, men who have shaped the gaming world as we know it today, and whose innovations will continue to influence how we play for generations to come. Episode 4, Evolving Roles and Relationships in the Gaming Industry.
So I would like to suggest that in the next half hour, first, let's not talk LLMs, although it may be difficult to avoid mentioning them. But an element that I think deserves our attention is the evolution of the relationship between companies, studios, and individuals. Very good. Yes, thank you for doing it. Yes. That is, in the 80s and 90s, really, the industry was dominated by the big companies. You went through them, and that was the only way to do it. And that determined the shape of the industry. With the internet, things started changing, and now the indie scene is very active and doing some very interesting things. Unfortunately, the indie scene is very difficult to assess because there's so much crap. It's really difficult to figure out what's good in that huge pile. So I'm just opening the floor to any comments about the role of the individual in the future. Will it end up being like the creation of novels with just one person tapping away at the keyboard? I don't know. Interesting problem.
Chris, just for clarity, the individual you mean is the creator, not the player.
Yeah.
We're going to be right into LLMs. I warn you.
Ready to go. Well, just.
And by the way, we're using that as, I think, a general phrase here to represent
Evolution in AI.
Yeah. Everything with AI generating audio, images. Yeah. And
let's just say new tool.
Powerful tool.
Yes. So, any thoughts or ideas?
Well, I think you're right about, if you think about console, you're right? The big companies were already in control in the early 80s, but not for PC. I don't think PC was under publisher control until mid-80s. Because there just weren't that many publishers. They were all tiny. They were all like literally back of the, stuff out of the trunk operations.
The plastic fags.
Yeah.
You mean the plastic bag generation?
I mean, there just weren't, it wasn't the same thing until, even when EA started, it was small. Right?
Yeah.
And I could get games. I was buying games in a game store. You bought them from either a distributor who was buying them from, 45 different places, or you bought from 45 different places.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't this, publisher overwatch until there started to be some consolidation there, and that really started to pick up around the mid-80s.
Yeah.
And I can say, just as one example, as a producer early on at EA and then at Bruggerbund, I feel very lucky in retrospect. In the early days at EA, there was a values-driven look at how things were trying to run a company, and there's no question you had sharp, tough business people. But the contracts we negotiated, we as producers, the guidelines we had for that were not intended to be exploitative. They were intended to protect the publisher, no question.
Yeah.
But compared to stuff I encountered later as a developer,
forget it. Yeah.
So, if I did something with you guys, I didn't have somebody saying, okay, here's the real goal behind it. And with the Carlson brothers, the same way. Each organization had its own things, but the Carlson brothers, the same way, were very ethically straight.
Yeah.
When you guys came back with SimCity, and it looked so cool, and I asked Gary, this was done under Bruggerbund and stuff. He said, "Yeah, there's nothing written down, but we told Will it was his and he could go shop it.
Mhm.
So we're just going to do the paperwork for that.
Yeah, they were great. And then we became their affiliate label. They did their distribution for us,
Yeah,
they were great.
I walked Jeff over to the distribution to the office for that.
Uh-huh.
But and there's other examples like that. The Carlston were trying. Nobody's perfect, but they were trying to be straight arrows.
Yeah.
The internal truth at EA, and Rich, you could comment on this, early in the day, was trying to be straight arrows. What you saw was what it was trying to be WYSIWYG and stuff, and that all changed later, and you got to all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But now I look back and I think, oh God, in 1988, I was still working for ethical people who were trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
They were imperfect like we all are, but they were trying to do the right thing. And that's later, I think, than a lot of people were still in that position.
Yeah.
Yeah. When's the last time you've seen a contract, Chris?
Last one was Bruder Button.
Yeah. You would be
Horrified.
You would be horrified if you saw what contracts say now to developers. I mean, everything from you need to know every software patent that's ever been done, and if you infringe on any of them, you're responsible, even though you're the publisher.
And trade secrets.
Yeah. So, and if our market cap drops, you need to make up the difference for the market cap of the company based upon. I mean, it goes on and on. You'd be looking.
Yeah, that market cap ones, right? Particularly, what I think is interesting is to look at today and then look at 1984, and I think they're more alike than we think in the following way. Sierra Online was the Ultima. They were Ultima. They did other stuff, but I don't know what it was. They were the Ultima guys. And Broderman was the Load Runner company. For the most part, publishers and game titles were synonymous. They were their own thing. When I've been trying to figure out how do I help the PC business today, there is no PC platform. The platform is the games. Fortnite is the platform. You know, and so what's interesting is I think we have evolved back to a point where publishers don't matter nearly as much as they used to because the game titles are what matter, and they matter to such an extent that they have obviated even the platform choice.
And typically they're not funding at the same, so they used to be our bank. They were our VCs to get games done.
Yeah.
And now they do not do that for the most part. There are deals done, but when you think about the vast aggregation of games that actually hit the market, they're funding 1% or less.
So these are indie games or small studio games that are self-funded.
Well, a lot of them are, or they're picked up late in the game, late in the process, or after they've even already shipped and then plussed up.
So you're accepting two markets, which is China and India.
Yeah.
Because their access does matter. And so again,
Platform matters in those two lists.
well, right, and well, no, it's also in China you actually need the licenses,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. It's very much controlled by government facilities. And India has gone to the point that Modi himself will interfere in deals, and Crafton had to basically agree to invest in a certain number of Indian properties, and so it's being used as a national industry. But in the West, we've had a major change, which is that so there was a series of formations which again I've ended up covering for Dean at any number of conferences. But we went from nobody investing. There were at one point over 30 game-specific venture firms, and it was overinvestment. And right now, it was massive overinvestment. This includes crypto, but still, it was overinvestment. And right
When you say 30, you mean just in the U.S.? Because there's a lot more that were game only.
I'm just talking about in the West, Europe, and
I thought there was
It's
30
closer,
a month.
it's closer to 100.
yeah, there were over 30 that actually have real money. Once you get past the seed, okay, if you count all the seed funds, yes, you'll get higher than that. But the point is, the point is, first off, they went high. Then you had the 2 years of the pandemic where the amount of game playing went up dramatically because people were locked in the house, and it helped to improve things. But the other thing we're finding out is venture-funded games have performed terribly as a class. And so right now, we do not know. In January, I was asked about this at the London conference. And I said, we will see a turnaround between now and 2030. They said, when? I said, I'm not smart enough to figure out whether it's going to be 2026, 2027, but we don't know the shape because the finances of this industry are so fundamentally flawed, and we are still recovering from a collective hallucination, misjudgment. Well, individuals may not be stupid, but the industry collectively has been. It's first off, we should have an offline conversation because I want to stick with the publishing. But the short version is, you can still get seed level and early stage funded. The great chasm is that you can't get right now. There's almost no funding going on at the intermediate levels. You can still get the occasional deal where 40 million is pumped into a company on its Series A or its seed round, but
it's an insider. It's an anomaly.
They can get excited about that, but to get something on its B round, when you might actually be making the company and taking it to market under classic venture capital, they won't do this. The number of deals that have done that are so few that I can count them. But again, there's a correction going on to understand what's going on, but it has funded an enormous number of games out there. And they still continue to do so because they have to justify to their LPs. It distorts the publishing guild because there is enough capital out there to support more games than the market will bear. And remember, the games that they're supporting are supposedly games that are original. So in other words, it's not something that it's not ones that are guaranteed to succeed, like, Call of Duty 17. Sometimes people find, well, they're the people who design League of Legends, so they're going to do the next League of Legends. That's about the closest thing they have to do. But again, we have to see this flush out, and until that, it has distorted the market. The thing that is distressing is that there's still not, unlike the movie business, there's not a good source of outside financial capital to support it. The closest thing we have are the Asian companies who are willing to fund Western games, but we do not have the maturity in the games industry where you have people who are the business fighting film for movies and so on and so.
The pullback at Tencent's exactly in the same spot you talked about.
I'm sorry.
The pullback at Tencent investment is all B round stuff.
Yeah, Tencent is, I did want to use an example because of CFIUS, because of,
But my point is they're doing it too, meaning that
they're doing it too, partly because the government first of all, to cover one.
Yeah, we know.
Okay, so China did something extraordinary. The Chinese games business was the largest in the world as of several years ago, and the Chinese government reduced the size of the industry. I've never seen something like that. Hi, you have a world leader, and we will reduce it. And it was because they said, wait a moment, games get the hearts and minds of people, and we want the Communist Party to control it, not you. But they literally reduced this. They literally clipped, 10 cents and NetEases and a whole generation. So that's a separate discussion.
I want to come back to your original question about, publishers versus indies. The thing that I think about, and I won't try to say LLM too much, but so you've got Steam, for example. There's already too many titles. Okay. We got a bunch of titles because of overfunding. Now we've got the AI titles coming where kids are going to talk on their microphone and crank out games, some good, some bad. I would argue that you'll be able to make a game as good as Limbo that costs $10 million, $20 million all by yourself pretty soon.
Yep.
And so there's going to be some good stuff coming. Okay. And so here comes more games than you've ever heard before, ever experienced. So then you start talking, well, are we going to be back to how are you going to know who they are? And then it's going to be back to who can spend money to even get you noticed, which becomes like the mobile market. I'm not saying that's what worries me, right? I'm part of Microsoft, so I'm not as worried, but you know what I mean? But that's where it becomes. So that's what I think about.
I agree, and I'll be more hyperbolic and say an infinite number of games are coming.
Yes.
There's already, speaking to your phone and get a game running and have it be up that everybody can play it instantly. But it's awful. But it's the worst it'll ever be. It's just getting better. So I think the question to ask is, so we're going to have a segmented market. We're going to have an infinite number of bad to mediocre games.
Yeah.
they're free for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think the money made on those will be made on YouTube by the people who talk about the games that they were just playing from that set of games. And that their focus will change every day on what game to check out.
What a bad game show.
And that's just coming. That's a tide coming in.
No, it exists already.
No,
It exists already.
the variety streamers right now, the ones who are the most successful are the ones that play and trash games.
Where are they going to?
They are much more successful than anybody who promotes a game or who finds you a good game to play. Like a factor of 10 or 100 more successful.
By the way, they're pretty entertaining too.
They wouldn't be
Unless it's
winning.
your
They
game.
wouldn't be winning if they aren't.
Money to be made there. And that, I think, I don't know how much of the gaming attention is going to be siphoned there, but it's going to be huge. And I tend to think that whoever controls the social network that wins in terms of serving the audience who's interested in that massive games is probably going to be making an awful lot of money in the next 5 years.
So we pretty much live in a world of infinite content now. Whether it be games, music, film,
Free.
Free. Infinite amount of content. I grew up with free TV stations. And so I think these influencers, if you look at this pyramid thing, whether the creators are up top, but it's the influencers that are going to be pulling in the audience. And even, for the bad stuff, and especially the bad stuff, it's really entertaining to watch somebody review a bad game just as they review a bad car. They can make it extremely entertaining. It's a platform for comedy. A lot of Amazon reviews, actually, Amazon became a platform for comedy within the book reviews. How to avoid large ships, stuff like that. So that's the world in which we have to learn to adapt and evolve to, right?
Right. And then above that massive free infinite stuff, there's going to be the quality indie games, and then there's going to be the kind of evergreen giants. I'm sure it's way more complicated than this, but I saw just an example of generated games in this one happy little online system where it went from like 200 in the first couple of days to tens of thousands, 10,000. And I just didn't know how to process that. There's no way to perceive it, as far as I can tell, as an individual. And also, I think what you're deriving from the game experience changes when the velocity of new games coming in is that broad.
Rod, you had
a lot of fun.
That becomes the game.
Yeah,
Making payroll often becomes the game as opposed to making the game.
Yeah.
here's a
This
thought
is the game company evolution discussion, right? Yeah. So can I push that a little over the horizon?
Sure.
The startup I'm in, the president is from the energy business. It's not actually from the games business at all, but he said something I had never perceived before, which is Gamer is the single largest affiliate group in the world today. Larger than any religion, larger than any language, larger than any country. That is really interesting.
Affiliate group.
What's your definition?
If only we were coherent, that would be awesome.
Got it.
So it's literally billions of people on a worldwide basis. So there are two things that come out of large groups of people like that. Fucking amazing things and fucking horrifying things. So here's the horror that's sitting in the back of my head is, and if there's a Scientologist, and I do not mean to be insulting, but what's L. Ron Hubbard going to do in the video games? And what could an L. Ron Hubbard do to focus a collection of gamers' interests in a particular direction? I might make the case that the next worldwide politician might come out of our space.
That's that feeds right into the point I wanted to make. In the 90s, we had these grand idealistic hopes about how the internet was going to make the world a place of peace and love. And instead, the internet has been the primary channel for disinformation.
Well, it's the best day the Klan ever had, as an example.
It empowered everybody.
Pardon?
Yeah.
It empowered everybody.
Yeah,
Equally.
and most people are
Confirmation
pretty
bias.
happy. So the internet has I think in some ways really made the world worse certainly in terms of politics. It's made it possible for people
I
to
think
spread.
almost every metric that they read has made it worse.
So, will we see something similar with games in that games will permit all sorts of crap? Will we see, Putin flooding the internet with really bad propaganda games?
They're going to already be trying that.
They did.
We saw MAGA before. We saw anyone who was in online games, which many of us were by 2010, 2014, had already seen the sort of behavior that occurs in politics. Gamergate, you want to see the incels and so on manifest themselves as a group from the games industry.
Yeah,
I mean, these behaviors that have permeated politics now throughout the world are things that anyone who is in online games was seeing at least as far as early as 2008.
I have to be a contrarian on the positive side.
Good.
Right?
If you are positive, I'm already happy.
So, you make a statement, most people are not good. You're absolutely wrong. Like in any of these online things, all it takes is a very small percentage loud to make it appear like that there's this huge fucking problem.
yes,
Right?
you're right.
Now, can the masses in between, the really bad and the truly good, be swayed and become like any crowd? You can drive a crowd, you can turn a crowd into a mob,
Right.
with the right triggers, right? And so we're seeing some mob-like behavior on all sides of the equation, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not picky, but
Right? Because this is a tool. It's an amplifying tool, and it lets small groups have an inordinate effect.
Yeah,
So, but I would not lose my faith in overall humanity. Most people who are out here in the real world, not in the cocoon of our business or in the cocoon of high tech, are like, and even those people, they're saying, oh, well, what am I up to? I'm trying to make a living, trying not to go broke. Right? I'm looking at my kids. I'm trying to figure out how my kids are going to end up in a better world than the one I was in. That's what they want. Now, everything conspires against that, by the way, in quantity. And so, and the more restive they get about that, the more swayable they are by these loud voices.
well, let me rephrase the point then, or reconfigure it. I'm assuming that individuals will be playing a larger role in the supply of games to the world. Will the increase in individual contributions result in a decrease in the overall merit of the community as a whole?
No.
Don't think so?
I
except getting paid.
Yeah.
well, in terms of propagating, say, there's white power bands.
Yeah.
You can use the parallel and say, are they more powerful? Do they get their message out greater than they used to? And I haven't seen evidence of that.
I think the answer to that is yes, but so is everybody else.
But part of the problem, I sat through a big presentation a couple months ago with the guy that ran Interscope Records, and 20 people, it was like 80% of Spotify's revenue.
Right.
So that's the world I worry about.
Oh,
there's all this great stuff, but that's like a horrible world to me when it comes down.
The industry did a good job. It's not a good example. They did a good job of reducing the amount of revenues. They decided their customers were their enemy, which is usually not a good strategy for to develop into business. And they essentially did everything they could not have done much different to encourage piracy as a moral good. Other than that, the music industry did a great job developing.
Well, then let's look at other media. Photography, has it been improved by the fact that any idiot now can take 1 million pictures for almost nothing? Book publishing, now you can publish your books on Amazon or whatever. Has that improved books? Movies, already we're seeing the cost of making shorts really decline. Do we anticipate that the overall quality of cinema will improve? And then what can we extrapolate into games from that knowledge?
Certainly for photography, it means that almost any current event gets captured on film.
Yeah.
Which can be bad, but I think it's mostly good.
I think books, when I think about, my own reading, the fact that there's more available and they're being rated and stuff, I think that's good, right? So I can remember when I got to read all the books that I wanted, and now there are way too many books to read, right? But that's because the supply was constrained. I wanted to read particular authors. I wanted to read about particular things. I would read about them unless I was going back in the archives and reading books, older and older books. But today I'm overwhelmed, right? And I read less too, which is another fucking problem.
And I think this is I'm glad we're talking in this direction because it's giving me some hope for stuff. But I would say even in games that we know the most about, the diversity of what we have now, and there's quality on all these levels where it's exactly the same thing. I just don't have time to keep up with all the stuff that's out there that looks interesting or at least is as good, for me objectively, as stuff from 20 years ago. So
we can point to television and say, look at the huge expanse.
Maybe you should define good. Because do we mean good creatively? Do we mean good economically? What do we mean?
As an
expanse on television too.
So he said art for it. He did say art.
Just on the art side. Got it.
Yeah. And so television has definitely improved a lot.
Yeah.
Certainly the days when Kathy and I would turn on the TV and he'd say, star date 2437.5, and we'd say, oh God, this one?
Yeah.
So, we've come a long ways from that. And the stuff the quality is better. But is that because streaming increased the revenue stream into television?
Well, for a lot of people, this is going to be around, or very few number of people doing YouTube videos or whatever will eventually one day become, Kevin Burns or something.
Yeah.
But in a world of infinite content, the main point of value is getting you the right content that you would enjoy. So we say good, but, in your mind, a good television show is different than my mind.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time for a conversation on the future of video game design.